Welcome to a story that isn't just heard, but felt deep in the heart. Get ready to dive into a journey that may mirror your life, or touch a part of your soul you didn't know was waiting. Hi Reddit, let's begin this beautiful journey together. My heart softened instantly as I squinted through my reading glasses to figure out how to repot the plants on the balcony when my phone began vibrating on the table. The screen displayed a familiar name, Evan, and a picture of him holding baby, Simon. The two of them were smiling so broadly that it felt like the sun had spilled directly into my living room. I sat down, wiped my hands on my apron, and quickly picked up the phone as soon as Mom Evan's voice could be heard. Hurried, laced with a tiredness that had just a hint of childlike pleading. "Are you busy these days?" I laughed, saying, "I'm retired, sweetie. What could I possibly be busy with? You, on the other hand?" He paused, and I heard the faint, fragmented whimpers of a baby in the background. It was Lara, and before he could finish, Simon's cry suddenly pierced the line sharply, high-pitched, and straight into my ear. The sound of my grandson's cries, who is only a little over 3 months old and still in that tender, cuddly stage that melts your insides, made my heart tighten. Laura had a C-section, and after the birth I had wanted to help, but her mother was staying over, so I gave up. I sighed heavily with exhaustion and helplessness. "You hear that when this little guy gets going? No one stands a chance, Mom. We're truly at our limit, and we need help." I didn't want to go too far because it was obvious that the two of them were in over their heads now that her mom had left. "I'll be there," I said without hesitation. "Don't worry. I'll pack a bag tonight and buy a bus ticket first thing tomorrow. The house has been too quiet for years since my husband passed away, so the opportunity to see Evan and the baby and be needed again warmed something deep inside of me." After I hung up, I sat there for a while, already taking notes in my head. As I went around the house gathering things, the little ache of loneliness I'd been carrying seemed to go away. I would need to bring a few small gifts, maybe some breathable cotton onesies for the baby, something soft and comfortable for summer, and those organic cloth diapers I got from a friend a while back, so much gentler on the skin than the store-bought disposables for Laura. I remembered that she once mentioned she liked those collagen gummies, saying they were good for the skin. Amid the excitement, I even pulled out an old parenting manual that I had saved in the hopes of brushing up on how to prepare baby food or soothe the baby with a gentle massage. After all, I raised Evan myself, so how could I just stand by and not help now that he has a child of his own? It's not a chore, it's an honor. And even if it meant testing this elderly body, it would be worth every ounce of effort. I could already picture 3 generations living in one house, with laughter reverberating through the hallways and a sleeping infant nestled against my chest. My heart was full of anticipation as I stood outside Evan's house the following morning, carrying a bulging suitcase behind me and holding a gift bag in my arms. Inside were boxes of collagen gummies for Laura and a few soft, breathable onesies for baby Simon. The door opened, and Evan's well-known beaming face appeared, saying, "Mom, you're here. Come in. Let me grab your bag." Without missing a beat, he parked the suitcase off to the side with casual ease. I leaned over his shoulder to survey the living room, which was reasonably clean, but had the distinct smell of baby formula and diapers mixed with something sour and damp, like the stale remnants of worry and exhaustion that had long gotten embedded in the walls. Laura came out of the bedroom with the baby in her arms, wearing a loose house dress, her hair tied up in a messy bun, and her face was pale with dark circles under her eyes. Looked at me blankly, nodded slightly, and whispered, "You're here, Chloe." The warmth in my chest extinguished like a match dipped in water, but I forced myself to ignore it because her voice was neutral, neither warm nor cold, like someone welcoming, a distant neighbor who showed up unexpectedly. Perhaps she was simply exhausted, or perhaps it wasn't personal, so I swiftly took out the gift bag and held it out to her. "Laura, knowing you've being exhausted lately, I brought you some collagen gummies, which are supposed to aid in skin recovery and may give you a little boost." She took the bag without opening it, thanked him, and then turned to leave, gently closing the door behind her. For a moment, I was left standing there, my hands still furious, and the silence hung awkwardly and heavily. Evan scratched his head, looking sheepish, and rubbed his palms together in an attempt to refocus the conversation. Here's the thing," he started, hesitating. "We're kind. We are now short on space, and the little guest room is still cluttered with items from Laura's pregnancy, including an old crib and baby equipment we haven't yet utilized. For now, would you mind crashing on the couch for a few days? I'll "Clean the room this weekend and get it ready for you," he said, glancing toward the living room's corner. He gestured toward the gray fabric sofa, which appeared to be clean enough but was still just a couch. I followed his instructions, and my heart gave a dull thud. I hadn't come for a vacation. I knew that I had come all this way to help them with the baby, but there wasn't even a room with a door. Just the living room. No privacy or quiet, just a shared space that would also serve as my bedroom. Nevertheless, as you looked at it, it felt like the thought had intruded. They didn't have to pay, but then I saw the look of desperation and apology in Evans's eyes as he stood there like a boy who knew he had done something wrong but didn't know how to fix it. I swallowed the lump in my throat, tamped down the sting in my chest, and managed a small smile. I patted his arm gently and said, "It's okay, really. The couch is wide enough. I'm just one person, so I don't need much. Go. Do what you need to. Don't worry about me." Relief filled his face as he appeared to have dropped a 50-pound backpack. "Get yourself some water." He vanished into the kitchen, and as I lowered myself onto the couch, my fingers brushing the rough fabric, a silent disappointment shook me like a stone dropped into still water, sending out waves that didn't stop. Perhaps he would actually clear out the room this weekend. Or perhaps I was just reading too much into it, but the way things felt made me wonder if they saw me more as Nanny Deluxe than as Mom. I chuckled quietly and bitterly that first. There was no separate air conditioning in the living room, and June in Connecticut can feel like a sealed sauna. The couch faced the sliding glass door to the balcony, and while it had a screen, the mosquitoes might as well have been airborne ninjas due to the high-pitched buzzing that circled my ears like a one-note concert in a closed room. My arms and legs were slashed with bites, which were itchy, red, and tender. The window had a mesh curtain, but I was afraid to open it too wide because those bloodsuckers could smell it. Body heat faster than a heat-seeking missile, and as I lay there, my skin was sweating and sticking to the cushion and the couch itself. The upholstery was a betrayal because it wasn't a bed. No matter how wide I shifted, I had to be careful not to roll off the edge because the springs creaked with every movement, making it impossible to fall asleep. On top of that, I had already been exhausted from spending half the day on a long bus ride, and now I was half awake all night listening for Simons. Then through the bedroom wall, I heard that all too familiar sound, sharp, urgent cries that pierced straight through the silence and tugged at something deep in my chest. I don't think I slept a wink before the sun was even up. I immediately got up and tiptoed toward the master bedroom, where the door was slightly ajar and Lara was holding Simon close, rocking him gently, her forehead resting against his brows, which were furrowed in exhaustion. Evan was still in bed, sound asleep, and he glanced up and saw me. Before she spoke, her face froze for a moment, and her tone was tinged with annoyance. "Chloe, why are you up so early? Did we wake you?" I said softly, trying to keep my tone, light and easy. "I heard the baby crying and thought I'd check in," she said. "He's hungry." I was about to feed him, but she turned her body away, giving me a quiet signal that I wasn't welcome or needed. Simon had the kind of energy only babies seem to have. He couldn't stay asleep for long and demanded to be held the moment he stirred. I backed out quietly and retreated to the living room, my footsteps suddenly cautious as if afraid I'd step on something fragile. Over the next 2 days, I became the house's unofficial full-time nanny. Laura breastfed the baby, but I was also responsible for burping, diaper changes, rocking him to sleep, and cleaning up the endless messes. When Lara did come out, it was to give instructions. "Chloe, the bottles need to be sterilized. Don't put the baby's clothes in the washer. They have to be hand-washed. The floor is getting dusty. Please give it a quick wash." She spent most of her time in the bedroom, where she would say she was recovering, but most of the time I would see her scrolling through her phone, laughing at videos, or tapping out messages with both thumbs flying. Evan was out of the office early and didn't return until the evening. He would give Simon a preemptive tickle and hold him for a minute or two before handing him back and collapsing onto the couch to doze off in front of the TV or vanishing into the home office with a half-hearted got to catch up on work. Every word sounded like a task list handed down to a housemaid, clinically cold and without even making eye contact. Mealtime was a minor embarrassment in and of itself as I prepared her meals. Her dishes were bold and heavily seasoned with garlic, black pepper, and jalapeno hot sauce, which she and Evan described as flavorful. With my sensitive stomach and years of sticking to mild, gentle food, it was overwhelming to watch him avoid responsibility with such practiced ease. Laura didn't even look up from her phone when I tried to speak up, saying, "Chloe, you'll just have to make do. I'm exhausted taking care of the baby. I don't have the energy to cook separate meals. If it really doesn't work for you, you can eat out." Usually, I could only eat a little salad or plain pasta while the rest of the table happily ate. Eventually, though, I tried to say, "My stomach's a bit sensitive. Next time you cook, maybe you could make something a little lighter, maybe a simple soup, or skip the chili." I came all this way to help and be a part of their family's joy, to contribute. But now it felt like I was paying off some ancient debt with my body. Like this was penance for sins I didn't remember committing by day. And by night, I was the baby wrangler. I'm glad we're feeding it all to you. Sweat trickled down my temples in the oppressive heat, and watching her so casually dismiss me made something balloon inside of me, like dough left too long to rise, and it swelled until it pressed hard against my chest. The hardest part wasn't the sore limbs or sleepless nights, but rather the feeling of being invisible, like I was just a placeholder, a gap filler, a tool to be used but never truly seen. By the third afternoon, the heat had become unbearable. The air was so still that not even a whisper of a breeze stirred the trees outside, and sunlight poured in through the windows like rain. Lumpy couch mealtimes felt like a gamble. Perhaps there would be something I could eat, but maybe not. It had only been 3 days. I walked him in circles around the living room, fanning him with a handheld fan, but it did nothing. He kept writhing in my arms, his cries soft but persistent, those pitiful whimpers that made my heart ache, and his face was so red that it scared me on the wall. The home was turned into an invisible oven by the liquid fire, and the humidity clung too, the skin thick and suffocating, making it difficult to breathe. Simon must have felt it too. I hesitated for a moment, then picked up the remote control, telling myself that I would only turn it on for a short while, just enough to cool things down for the baby. I was drenched in sweat, and my shirt was sticking to my back like wet paper. I pressed the button, and the machine hummed to life, sending out a soft, refreshing stream of cool air. Within minutes, Simon quieted, and the relief was instantaneous. His eyelids drooped over his eyes. I was about to sit down to finally rest when the bedroom door suddenly flew open. Laura must have heard the air conditioner turn on because she stomped across the room and slapped the power button on the unit without saying anything. The fan stopped instantly, and the cool air was replaced in a heartbeat by the thick, oppressive heat. It felt like someone had yanked away the last of the cool air. She said, "Chloe, do you have any idea how much electricity that thing uses in just 1 hour?" In a sharp, loud, and completely unfiltered voice. "We're already drowning in bills, formula, diapers, and the mortgage, and we don't need to be throwing money away running the AC all day. Use the fan. That's more than enough for a baby." Her tone wasn't suggestive. Rather, it was scolding and dismissive, as if she were reprimanding a housekeeper who'd stepping out of line. She didn't even look at me. Instead, she just stared at the apartment as if I had committed some financial crime. For a brief moment, my ears rang, and my blood rushed to my head, making it impossible for me to hear anything else in the house. It wasn't about the electricity or being reprimanded. Rather, it was about the fact that I had been holding a baby who was flushed, sweating, and uncomfortable, and all I had wanted was to ease his discomfort. That small act of carelessness had earned me a public humiliation. I looked at her, opening my mouth to say something, but it wasn't the air conditioner that shut off. Rather, it was the part of me that had come all this way out of love, devotion, and the desperate hope that I still mattered, and she had slammed it to the ground and stepped on it as if it meant nothing. The sound came out of my throat. The humiliation, the anger, and something colder, disappointment and sorrow, rose up in one wave and crashed over me. I stood there soaked in it. I was still in the middle of the living room, holding Simon, who had just calmed down and was now starting to fuss again, as the heat wrapped around us like a wet blanket. The air felt solid with silence, and my eyes stung, but I refused to cry. Because tears wouldn't help me, they never had. They would only make me look weak and pitiful. In response, she spun around and went back into the bedroom, closing the door behind her with a firm thud. In my arms, Simon shifted slightly, his little brows furrowed, his face still flushed and damp, a mirror of how I felt inside. I picked up the fan again and began waving it back and forth in slow mechanical strokes, and when he finally fell asleep, his breath was gentle, and even his tiny hand curled into a fist against his cheek. He was beautiful, so innocent, so helpless, and the more I looked at him, the more I realized how beautiful he was. The more I think about what I've been through, the more my heart aches. I've been sleeping on a couch, getting mosquito bites, on my legs, eating meals that made me sick, and being told to just get by. I've been taking care of their child every waking hour, cleaning their house, and running around without stopping, only to be treated like a hired hand and now reprimanded for using the air conditioner while attempting to assist their baby for 3 days. It wasn't just the exhaustion that hurt. It was being treated like I had come all this way for what? They were young and overwhelmed, and I thought maybe, just maybe, I could lighten the load. However, they didn't see it that way, and everything I did was assumed to be a duty obligation because we were family, because blood is thicker than water. I had dreamed of warm, noisy dinners with baby giggles and sleepy cuddles of being loved. The old saying, "The greatest sorrow is a heart gone cold," used to sound so dramatic, but now I realize that it wasn't anger or even heartbreak, but rather the gradual freezing of everything inside me. I would rather not argue or yell because what was the point of fighting with someone who didn't hear you, who only saw their exhaustion and not your effort in that stuffy, airless room? Something inside of me went still, and in that stillness, I made a decision that evening once Evan. I pulled him aside when I got home from work and Lara was nursing in the bedroom. I spoke softly and calmly, being cautious not to let the stress of the previous few days show in my voice. "Evan," I whispered softly, "I'm heading home tomorrow." He had just taken off his jacket. "Why are you going back so soon, Mom? You've only been here a few days," he said, his hands freezing in mid-motion as he turned to face me with a look of surprise. "I assumed you would remain longer to assist us with the baby." I averted his gaze because I had to take care of something at home, and it appeared that Laris had everything under control. I didn't bring up the couch, the food, or the air conditioner, and the commands sounded like orders, but there was no use in any of that. Now, Evan's brow was furrowed, and his voice was beginning to sound worried. "Mom, wait. Is this because Evan, Laura, and I are fine, really? I just have my life to manage, and there are things I need to deal with." He looked at me as if he wanted to argue, but the words never came. He nodded slowly instead, his lips pressed tight the next morning before sunrise. "Do you think Lara upset you? You can tell me that she's a little short-tempered right now, but she doesn't mean anything by it. Don't take it personally." Evan stood by the front door, his eyes a little red, trying to say, "One last time, Mom. You don't have to rush off. I'll clean out the guest room today. I'll get you a roll-away bed. Please just stay a little longer. Stay comfortable." I shook my head gently, my voice warm but firm. "No, Evan. It's time you've got a full-time job, and Laura needs to grow into her role as a mom. It's important you two learn how to manage on your own, even to my own ears." The words had a finality to them, a quiet line drawn in the sand. I won't be returning to help like this again, but I knew it was what I needed to say. Laura never left the bedroom, Perhaps she was still asleep, or perhaps she simply didn't care whether I left or stayed. Strangely enough, that made things easier. At least there was no need for pretense. Evan drove me to the bus station. The conversation was quiet and full of unspoken things, and he opened his mouth a few times only to sighing and going silent once more. He reached into his wallet and took out 2 crisp $100 bills just before we pulled up to the station. He handed them to me sheepishly and hesitantly, saying, "Don't be mad, Lar. You've just been overwhelmed. The baby has been so fussy and she's not herself. I don't mean to be harsh here. Please take and buy yourself something nice." As I looked down at the money, a tangle of emotions rose inside of me. Was it an apology or a payoff? Did he really think $200 could balance the sleepless nights, mosquito bites, cold shoulders, and the sensation of being invisible? I didn't take it. I gently pushed his hand back, and my voice remained steady. But something had subtly changed between us. "I don't need it, Evan. I have my money, so you hold on to it. You'll need every penny." With a baby in the house, he didn't argue, just folded the bills back into his wallet, his eyes downcast as if he was at a loss for words. When the car was at the curb, I opened the door and stepped outside before he could follow me inside. "Call me." "Okay, when are you coming home?" With a hint of doubt in his voice, he said softly behind me, "I will." And I replied, pulling my suitcase upright before turning to face the crowd and walking into it without turning around on the bus. As the scenery passed in reverse, my heart became quiet in a way it hadn't been in days. Not with anger, not with sadness, but with peace and calm that came from. The familiar warmth of home rushed to greet me as soon as I turned the key and pushed open my front door. The sunlight streaming through the floor-to-ceiling windows made the hardwood floors glow like honey, and the stillness of the house felt like a long-overdue exhale. I entered the bedroom and collapsed face first onto my bed, allowing my body to sink into the mattress. I took a deep breath, and the scent of sunlight and fresh laundry lingered in the sheets. It smelled like peace, like something that had once belonged to me. I sat at the edge of the bed, and as my eyes drifted up to the picture of my husband on the wall, his soft smile gazed back at me, warm and steady. In my mind, I could almost hear him say, "Don't wear yourself out. Come home and rest." The few days at Evans felt like a strange, sobering dream that was part absurdity and part awakening. I whispered a confession to him in my heart and said farewell with tenderness, recalling how we had worked hard and safely to assist Evan in repurchasing his home. "He's just starting out," we said, drawing from our retirement fund to cover the down payment. "Life's hard enough. Let's give him a leg up." After my husband passed away, I continued to support Evan and Laura when they were unable to pay the mortgage. I offered no help, but insisted on paying $3,000 a month, and I did so for more than 2 years. I thought that giving would earn gratitude, and that love would breed love. But now that I look back, I can clearly see that the more I gave, the more I used to think that unconditional love for your child was something noble. But now I know that some people will never thank you. They will only resent you for not giving more. In their eyes, this elderly mother didn't even have the right to run the air conditioner for her overheated grandson. Those 3 days weren't just exhausting, they were clarifying, like a bucket of ice water dumped on a delusion I'd cradled for years. I sat on my cozy, clean couch and opened my banking app. The balance wasn't huge, but it was mine. It was the security I'd built for myself over a lifetime of saying, "I'm fine, and I don't need much." As I gazed at the screen, memories flashed through my mind like real Laura's icy eyes as she turned off the air conditioner, Evan's guilty silence, and my restless nights on that. The answer came instantly when I whispered the question out loud. Narrow couch. Was it worth it? My finger was hovering over the familiar transfer page, but I didn't press it. Instead, I opened a travel website and looked for quick trips along the Portland coast. Then I looked through the community college catalog, which introduced me to illustration and beginner pottery. I decided that going forward, the money I used to send them each month would go to me, not Evan or Laura. The days that followed were quieter than usual, and in the mornings I would walk through the park talking to the local ladies about their grandkids and garden projects. Is not to make things easier, but for me, a woman who spent the majority of her life caring for others deserves to take care of herself at last. She deserves to sleep well, eat what she likes, and live like a person, not a shadow, even if it's just a new pair of walking shoes or a quiet dinner. For the first time in a long time, I was no longer holding on to the illusion that I was needed, and in that release, I found a gentler kind of freedom. In the afternoons, I would water the plants on my balcony while the sun warmed my arms. In the evenings, I curled up on the couch with the TV humming in the background and slept through the night without interruption. That calm wasn't something I forced. Rather, it came naturally, like a knot slowly untying, because 2 or 3 days after the end of the month, Evan finally called the. As soon as I picked it up, I heard the cautious, tiptoeing tone in his voice. That meant he was looking for something, Mom. Did you possibly forget something? I was holding the spray bottle, gently misting the plants by the window, when he said that. My hand hesitated, but I didn't let that stop me from speaking clearly. You know the mortgage, he said. You haven't transferred the money this month. I repeated, setting the bottle. The garden below was in full bloom, with clusters of roses illuminating the space with color. I let my eyes rest there and said softly, Evan, I've thought it over from now on. You and Laura should handle the mortgage yourselves. The silence on the other end was so complete that it seemed like the call had ended. Keep going. You two have jobs now, and you're making money. It's time you learn how to carry the weight of your own home. My retirement fund didn't appear out of thin air. It came from within. The silence lasted longer this time, so long that I nearly thought he had hung up. But then his voice returned, flustered and sharper than before, saying, I want to take a pottery class, maybe head up north for a few days, and stand on the shore, and listen to the ocean. I need to hold on to what's left over after decades of hard work saving penny by penny, not to splurge, but because someday I might get sick or need care, and I can't afford to have nothing when that day comes. It wasn't a plea. Rather, it was an accusation that I had broken a contract, pulling the rug out from under them. I nearly laughed when he said, Mom, what are you even saying? We had an agreement. You said you'd keep helping until I got promoted. You can't just stop out of nowhere. Do you know how tight things are this month? That's $3,000 just gone. We can't cover that overnight. When I turned on the air conditioning for their baby, after everything, the couch, the cold remnants, the barking orders, and that blank stare, Evan continued to talk about how expensive the baby was, how stressed Laura had been, and how they were trying their hardest. Then, more reluctantly, he said, Mom, this isn't still about that AC thing, is it? You're in your 30s, you have a job and a family, and it's time to act like a grown man and take responsibility for what's yours. Come on, that was nothing. And you're not still upset about that, right? I cut him off, and although my voice wasn't loud, it was crystal clear, calm, and unshakable. This isn't about being upset or punishing anyone. It's about clarity. I supported you in the beginning because I loved you and understood how difficult it could be to start out. That was grace, not obligation. But now that you are stable and earning a home, you have a debt to pay off, and that is your responsibility. You claim that life is easy, but you can't keep depending on me whenever things get difficult. I can support you for a while because I wanted to in the past, but I won't carry you forever. And to be honest, I've earned the right to start living for myself. There was silence once more, just the sound of his heavy, uneven breath crackling through, the line like static. After a long pause, he muttered, Oh, I get it. The call ended, and I sighed quietly as I stared at the screen, which was still warm in my hand, and realized that Lara was with her. I knew deep down who it was, so I calmly answered, "Hello, Chloe. What the hell is this supposed to mean?" Pride and a sharp tongue wouldn't let it go without a storm. But for the time being, at least I had drawn the line, and I was finally standing on the side that belonged to me. Sure enough, it didn't even take half a day before my phone lit up, with a call from an unfamiliar landline. She must have realized that I had blocked her cell phone and that she had made the extra effort to call from a different number. "You think you can just back out like that?" she snapped. "You promised to help Evan with the mortgage and now you just decide to stop just like that? That's not right. It's dishonest." Lara's voice exploded through the speaker, shrill and sharp-edged, her rage cutting straight through the line. "Do you even realize how much we're spending right now on formula and diapers? Bills are piling up and this mortgage is suffocating us, and you're just going to walk away?" Instead of responding immediately, I pressed my palm lightly against my knee and grounded myself in that simple warmth. These were the same hands that had rocked her baby to sleep, scrubbed her dishes, and folded her laundry continuously and without gratitude. But she didn't stop. "You promised Chloe that you would help until Evan got that promotion, so what are we supposed to do now?" Her words came out of thin air like darts, each one sharpened with resentment. I let her vent and let it all out, because I could hear the desperation beneath her anger, and she needed someone to blame, and since I was the easiest target, I wasn't going to stop her. Interrupt her moment. But as she was ranting, my thoughts went back 3 weeks ago, when the living room was oppressively hot, the baby was crying and sweating in my arms, and Laura was walking out to turn off the air conditioner with a cold flick of her wrist because we couldn't afford the electric bill. Now she was accusing me of being heartless for leaving them. But when I was the one standing in their home, sweltering, sleep-deprived, eating scraps, and working like a ghost, in the background, where was her concern? How could they have thought of helping us? Been a partnership? It was a one-way pipeline, and I gave the money. When they demanded more, I finally spoke, and my voice was steady as if I had practiced it 100 times. "You're right, Lara. I did decide to stop sending the money, but I didn't do it on the spur of the moment. I gave it to you because I wanted to, but now I've decided I need to help myself." There was a brief, tense silence before the next wave occurred. Her voice had a new edge now, not just anger but something darker, a warning, a threat. But I wasn't rattled. I didn't raise my voice, I didn't match her tone, and I simply answered quietly and firmly, "Laura, that responsibility was never mine." Harsher, more frantic. "That's low, Chloe. You're doing this just to make things harder for us if we default on this mortgage. Do you even understand what that means? Are you really prepared to take that kind of responsibility? You are right about one thing. Your life is difficult. Raising a child, maintaining a home, making ends meet. But it is your life to figure out, not mine to fund. I'm not punishing you. I'm just done acting like I have no boundaries." There was nothing but silence, no yelling, no protests, just a kindness. First of all, that house was your choice, your loan, and your obligation. And being Evan's mother doesn't make me your financial safety net. Dead halt, as if she had slammed into an unexpected wall. Then the call ended. I sat for a while with the phone in my lap, watching the screen go black. My fingers were still warm from the call, and my chest felt strangely calm. I thought that might be the end of it, that perhaps we had finally drawn our lines and parted ways. But of course, life rarely lets you off that easy. Something told me that Lara wasn't done yet. That morning, I received a phone call from a neighbor. I had just returned from the ceramics class at the community college with a small lump of clay in my hand. My first attempt at a teacup was still wet and crooked, but I was setting it out to dry when Carol, an old friend and longtime church volunteer, answered. Her voice was low, as if she were holding something in her hand. Is everything okay with your daughter-in-law? Carol stopped by the rec center today and said you cut them off financially. My hand jerked, and the teacup almost slipped from my fingers when the freeloader said that you accused her of causing her to suffer from postpartum depression and bleeding the family dry. She said, "At the center?" I asked. She said it in a few places, to which Carol responded. At first, I didn't pay much attention, but today she returned and doubled down, telling people that you told her, and I'm quoting, "I'd rather she's even showing people pictures." So I closed my eyes for a moment, pressing down on the rising heat behind them. "Thank you for telling me, Carol," I said in a calm voice. "But no, I didn't say that, and I didn't think so." She sighed, "But people were saying that you're cold and cruel for abandoning a poor new mother." After we hung up, I opened the community group chat on my phone was called Sunnybrook Neighbors United, and it had over 100 members. I quickly scrolled up and saw that Laura had shared a screenshot of a private message. The screenshot was a chat log that included a message from me that said, "Some people think I'm a dog, apparently. Sometimes dogs are kinder than people, but at least they know how to be grateful." I closed my eyes once more as my eyes began to light up with likes, shares, and worried comments. I recalled the private message I had sent to an old friend the day I finally cut off Evan and Laura. The friend had texted me, "You're too soft." I had replied, half joking, half bitter, "Sometimes dogs are kinder than people." Then there was another post with a picture of the cotton onesies I had handpicked from the mall last month when I still thought Laura might say, "Thank you." They were on a resale platform with the caption, "Brand new, never worn gift from Emil, but far too outdated. DM if interested." I never once imagined that message would wind up plastered on the town's bulletin board. I spent an entire afternoon selecting those, and she hadn't expressed gratitude. She had simply put them online for sale. I didn't reply, didn't argue, didn't try to remove my name, and I left the group chat, turned off my notifications, and deleted the contacts I didn't need. However, Laura wasn't done, and 3 days later I ran into her outside the grocery store, where she was carrying a shopping cart while holding the baby in one arm. With the other, she positioned herself directly next to me. Her tone was sharpening and she said, "Why do you have to tell people I'm a parasite? You think it's fun for me to walk into the post office and have people stare like I'm trash even here?" I glanced at her, so I said nothing. She leaned in a little, eyes narrowing. "Aren't you?" "Chloe, are you happy now everyone in the neighborhood is talking? You've really stirred the pot," she continued. "You're even a little scared that Simon will grow up and discover the true nature of his grandmother," which stopped me. I looked her in the eyes, and, for the first time in days, I let my voice carry. What I'm scared of is Simon growing up and learning how his mother treated the woman who once held him while she slept through the afternoon. She froze, so I pushed my cart forward a few steps and spoke again without turning around. "If you want to insult me, lie. I'm not your Adam. About me selling the things I gave you, okay? But don't think I'm going to keep stomping on you and giving you pieces of myself to stomp on, Simon. You're not an orphan, and you're not disabled, so stop acting like you need my help." Her cheeks flushed with rage. I turned to face the baby in her arms, then I softened, but only because I didn't want anything I said. "I just want to live my life, sleep in the bed I bought, spend the money I made, go wherever I want, and eat whatever I want. And you think I don't love Simon?" Then I walked into the store behind me, and I heard Simon's whimper, which is the beginning of a baby's cry. But Lara didn't follow. That night, I changed into my loungewear, turned on the kettle, and made a basin of hot water for a peaceful foot soak. The steam rose in soft curls, and when my phone buzzed, it was Evan. We hadn't spoken since that day at the store, and his message was short. "Mom, I'm sorry. I know Lara went too far this time." I stared at the words, my thumb hovering over the screen, but I didn't reply. Apologies are nice, but this one has arrived too late and too cold for the past 2 weeks of my days. For the first time in a long time, my small home felt peaceful, almost unaffected by the commotion of the previous few weeks. I was sitting on a park bench watching the wind rustle through the trees when my phone buzzed again, this time from an unknown number, Mom. The voice on the other end was shaky and frantic, and it was me, Simon. Simon has a high fever. It's almost 100 he's out of it, and I don't know why. It had felt almost unreal in their quiet, with no messages, phone calls, or even a passing mention from Carol. What should I do? Who is Evan? His voice is cracked. I've been trying to call the hospital but can't get an appointment. Lara isn't returning my calls, and I don't even know where she is. My heart is clenched. I asked, "I'm coming right now." And he gave me the hospital's name. I immediately grabbed my bag without giving it any thought. I didn't consider the past, or what had been said or not said. All I knew was that my grandson was ill and that I was needed. Evan stood in line at the triage desk, sweating, through his shirt and his arms hurting as he held a limp, red-faced Simon against his shoulder. The baby's little hand dangled, barely gripping his father's collar. His tiny body burned with fever, and his head rested against Evan's neck as he let out soft, pitiful whimpers. Evan's eyes darted between the never-ending line in front of him and the pale, sweating child in his arms, looking like a man unraveling under stress. Then, at the desk next to him, he noticed a slight movement. An older woman with silver hair and a navy cardigan draped loosely over her thin shoulders was bouncing a feverish toddler in her arms and searching through her bag for an insurance card. At her feet were 2 large packs of diapers and a child's backpack. The child was leaning against her shoulder, and her eyes were red and glassy, and her lower lip was shaking from recent tears. The woman whispered softly in his ear, "Hang in there, sweetheart. Grandma's I'll sign you up, and we'll see the doctor shortly, all right?" Evan paused, and it came to him like a flashback. He had been that feverish boy sobbing in a hospital at night once, and his mother had been the one standing in that exact line for hours, supporting him with one arm while she had paperwork in the other. She had bent down to give him water, and she had comforted him in a whisper, even as her own. He looked down at Simon, his own son, who was burning with a fever and clinging to him for comfort. For the first time, he apologized not to his child but to the woman who wasn't there to hear it. "I'm sorry," he whispered. By the time I got to the hospital, Simon had been admitted, and he was curled up against my chest, his little face flushed, and his breath was coming in. His eyes looked heavy with sleep. She had stayed up all night for him, something he hadn't remembered until now. Evan sat next to me. His shoulders fell quiet, and he gripped onto my top with one small hand like an anchor. After a long silence, he suddenly whispered, "Mom, I apologize for everything," in a hoarse voice. I kept my eyes on Simon and avoided looking at him. "How long has the fever been going on?" 3 days, he replied when I inquired gently. Laura said it was just a little cold in a voice that was barely above a whisper. I thought it would go away. But this morning he wouldn't wake up properly, so I knew it wasn't just a cold. I nodded once and said nothing, and Evan let out a long sigh. Laura was at a friend's party the other night, and I didn't push it, didn't think, God. I turned to look at him, and then my eyes became steady and sharp. "Your father, Evan, your son had a fever for 3 days, and neither of you." On the other side of town, Laura was going through the most embarrassing moment of her life. The day before, she proudly shared a picture on Facebook, wearing a chic camisole and her lips glossed, posing with a group of girlfriends at a hip cafe. The caption read, "Being a mom doesn't mean forgetting who you are as a child. You did everything you could. You continued going to work, and your baby was burning up." His head dropped as if all the air had been let out of him like a balloon, punctured clean through. is neither a cage nor an excuse. "Hut Mama Love, you look good as a mother," the responses poured in quickly. Laura smiled, tapped a like, and leaned back, pleased. But then a new comment shot straight to the top. It was from her old college roommate, now a pediatric nurse at a local hospital. She wrote, "Funny. Go ahead and be yourself. Even when you have a 102 fever right now and your child is an hour away." A woman at the table, whom Lara hardly knew, looked at her and said bluntly, "Maybe stop complaining about your mother-in-law not helping. It seems like you're not even helping yourself." Laura's cheeks turned pale as the brunch came to an end. She didn't say goodbye. She simply grabbed her bag and ran out the door without going home. Instead, she sat in her car looking through old pictures, most of which she had once rolled her eyes at. One in particular caught her attention, a picture of Chloe holding Simon upright and gently patting his back to burp him. She had deleted the photo years ago, calling it dull and clingy, but somehow it had come back from a backup. She looked at Chloe's kind, patient eyes, full of care, remembering how she had made fun of her and called her too much. The following night, while I was still in the hospital with Simon, he had finally broken the fever. His breathing was deeper now, and he was curled against my chest with one hand loosely holding onto my shirt as Evan fell asleep. She had posted those baby clothes that she had bought too old-fashioned, saying that she was trying to sell them online for a few bucks. Someone had haggled the price down to less than the cost of a coffee, and suddenly something in her cracked. He sat there in the car crying for 2 full hours, her voice going hoarse, her makeup streaking down her cheeks, and her voice going hoarse. I hadn't slept at around 2 a.m. next to me. I got a message on my phone that said, "I blamed our problems on mother-in-law drama when the truth is I was lazy. I lied about what you said. Furthermore, I sold the clothes you bought." It wasn't a call, text, or email, and the subject line was blank. The message was shakily scattered and contained no charm or excuses. "I'm not a good mother, and I haven't been a good daughter-in-law. I know it's too late, but I hope you believe me when I say that I finally understand." An old photo of the two of us laughing in the kitchen, with flour on our hands from baking, cookies together, was attached. I stared at it for a while, then I put the phone face down on the nightstand and closed my eyes. In the weeks that followed, Simon had a few more fevers, as babies frequently do. But this time, instead of calling me in a panic, Evan and Laura worked things out. Occasionally, they text me, "Mom, does this look like a rash? Should we switch between Tylenol and Motrin?" Normally, I would respond, but I started responding later on purpose, not because I was upset, because they needed to attempt it on their own first. Laura wrote replies that were too brief, courteous, and never warm. I didn't ignore her, but I also didn't rush to make things better. We weren't fixed, but perhaps we were headed in the right direction. The plants on my balcony had bloomed again, so I repotted each one, carefully loosening roots and trimming leaves to refresh the soil. That evening, as the sunlight spilled softly across my living room floor, I curled up on the couch with a cup of tea and started reading the travel guide. For the first time in a long time, I realized something deep down inside of me. Life isn't about surviving. It's not about making sacrifices until nothing's left. It's about taking care of yourself, not to prove yourself, but because you deserve it. I wasn't going anywhere. I wasn't planning to leave again, but I wasn't the same mother who came running in at every cry. I wasn't the woman who overextended to avoid loneliness, and I wasn't the invisible force. Maintaining a household in silence while I was myself, my relationships were still healing, my child was still developing, and my truly rich and fulfilling days were just getting started. However, this time, I was living for